Just wondering about people's experience in general. Story 1. My son has been very easy. The biggest discipline issue has been when he would leave his bike behind my car in the driveway. He's quiet and a bit shy, very into following the rules to get positive feedback. He's responsible and does his homework and chores without supervision. My daughter, friends and family say she is my payback for how I behaved as a kid or teen. She is a gifted child with a curiosity about everything. She is impulsive and does not always stop to consider the consequences of her actions. We have tried to be flexible with rules so as not to overly confine her creativity. For example, our rule is that she can write and draw on the walls, but only in her bedroom and the playroom. She has not reached the dating age yet. I have a feeling it will be crazy. She is very inventive when it comes to lying. Trust but verify is the way I have to treat her. Here's a great example of her lying. She got her period and they were really painful for her. She would miss a day of school, sometimes two. She would have us wait on her, bring her soup, etc. After about a year, it came out that she was lying. She didn't have her period yet and was pretending so she could skip school and be babied with her favorite foods. Story 2. I have one of each. I wouldn't say either is easier or harder. It's different. My daughter can be excessively defiant, and my son is avoidant. Most of the time, they are lovely little people. Story 3. You would get a different answer from my wife and me, as the kids switched allegiances when they became teenagers. All of a sudden, my daughter and I were inseparable, and my son was hanging out with my wife more. Truth be told, both of mine were pretty easy, and being a dad was the best thing I ever did. Story 4. As the father of daughters, I didn't have any comparisons until I started coaching their co-ed sports teams. The girls, including my daughters, paid more attention, listened to directions, were more task-oriented, and were honestly tougher when it came to minor injuries. The boys were more fidgety, not necessarily defiant, but wanted to do things their own way, always wanted to prove how strong or fast they were, and were honestly more whiny and emotional, especially when they took the slightest bump or tumble. Age group 6 through 12 years old. Story 5. I would say birth order has more to do with it than gender. Our son is very calm and can sit and play peacefully, while our daughter is a terror and runs around the house screaming. This is because our son was raised solely by 2 adults who love him, and our daughter was raised by 2 adults who love her and a 3-year-old boy. Story 6. I think it depends a lot more on the individual child's personality than on whether they are a boy or a girl. I know people who had challenging boys and others who had challenging girls. None of the children I raised were particularly difficult. They each had their own unique traits that caused some stress as they were growing up, but nothing too extreme. Story 7. My father always wanted sons. All 3 of his siblings have all boys, but he had all girls. I am an adult now and talked to him about it the other day. He told me that he was honestly disappointed at first, but after seeing his nephews grow up, he was more than happy to have girls and realized his luck. He said we were much easier to raise than he saw his siblings with their sons. He told me he wanted sons because he wanted someone to teach about cars and talk about football with. But growing up, I would sit on the hoods of cars as he worked, and my sister would always watch football with him. He said he realized he could do anything with daughters as he could with sons. We are successful as an engineer and in law school, so he said, it was just how I grew up that men were the successful ones. I wanted my children to be successful in life, but you all taught me that's not true anymore. Why do I need sons? You guys are more successful than all my nephews combined. Story 8. I have one of each, both in their early teens. They are very different personalities, which I think is much more of a factor than gender. Mine have both been great, nothing at all like I was as a kid, thankfully. Story 9. My daughter is and has always been super independent. She's been fairly easy to raise because she's been able to figure out and do most things she needs to on her own with some guidance. She brushes her teeth without being told. She uses the washer and dryer and knows how to do her own laundry. She's 8. My son has always needed extra guidance on things. If you don't tell him to brush his teeth and physically make him do it, he won't. He has no interest in figuring out things for himself and definitely doesn't know how to wash his own clothes. He's 6, so I give him the benefit of the doubt. I always try to remember what my daughter was like 2 years ago instead of thinking, why can't he? Story 10. I have 5 kids, 2 boys and 3 girls. None of them have been harder to raise. They all come with their own issues, and I never saw a difference in the magnitude of toughness in raising them. If you talk to them, kids are super easy to raise. Story 11. No, they are both equally challenging. Maybe the challenges are different for boys and girls. Very often, they are the exact same challenges. Kids are kids. Both genders will easily find ways to frustrate and challenge you, and every kid will have their unique way of doing it. Story 12. I've had multiple of both, and the answer is unsurprising. It depends on the child. Raising them all, each kid was different, and we faced unique challenges with both genders. Just when you thought you had one figured out, the next kid came along and proved everything wrong. Story 13. Have a boy and a girl, and my first thought is that the number is too small to really respond regarding boys or girls. In my case, my son is much more laid back, has always been very sweet, and pretty much has never given us any issues whatsoever. He's 20 and in his 3rd year of college. But that's just his personality. My daughter is much more strong-willed and opinionated. Relatively speaking, she's a great daughter, 18, but has always kept us on our toes. But she's also on schedule and doing great. Just finished her first quarter in college and is very motivated. We've been lucky with both kids. In terms of whether, as a dad, it is easier to raise a girl or a boy, I guess it seems about equal. I probably worry more about my daughter in terms of relationships because my instinct is to protect her in a way that is different from my son. But in most other ways, it feels about the same. Story 14. Both are equally complicated. Girls mature quicker but have more complex emotions that make them a little tougher to deal with. They can be quite cruel to their brothers both verbally and physically if bigger. Their emotional terrorism to their brothers can be legendary. Boys are constantly trying to harm themselves. Fights break out from nowhere, and there is this innate need to just wrestle or fight that you usually have to address daily by allowing them to expend energy. When you bring that spirit out, it is hard to get them settled back down. They are often less emotional but have a hard time expressing themselves and need to be taught how to verbalize complex feelings. No day is a break. There is always something to parent or referee, and the goal is to raise kids who are kind and loving to each other. Those television shows where the siblings go at each other at the dinner table in front of the parents are complete nonsense and not happening here. They are the family we are building for when we are long gone. Story 15. Easier? Nothing is easy about parenting. They both require attention in different ways. I'll have a different answer each day of the week depending on what fire each kid started. Story 16. I raised 2 daughters with my wife. Thank God for my wife, I will tell you. My first daughter was a studious, motivated, cheerful girl. My second daughter came out of the womb with a bad attitude, jumped out her window at night, ran away from home, and was a defiant nightmare. The thing that salvaged the situation was my wife and her patient, girl-on-girl methods. Today, they are both amazing women who are very well respected in their careers. Story 17. I have one of each. Honestly, each is equally hard in their own way. Some things are harder with a girl, like puberty, but boys, if you don't ask them to stifle their feelings, can be just as emotional as girls. Story 18. Girls are usually better behaved and easier to manage when they are young. They are happy to sit and color. Boys tend to be pretty rowdy and have not learned to control that inner fire that ignites when they get bored, so you have to ensure they have something engaging or they act up. Boys also tend to break more things in general. This all mellows out by about 8 or so. When you get into the teen years, it depends on the girl. If she is prone to getting into trouble, it can be challenging. The difference between boys and girls in their late teens or early 20s is that there is no limit to how much trouble girls can get into for free. Free alcohol, free drugs, free relationships, free trips, free money. Boys, on the other hand, still have to earn all the trouble they get into, so unless they are selling drugs or have severe issues, they will probably do one big stupid thing that will not be entirely life-altering, usually. One thing that absolutely shocked me was how easy certain things are for girls. Finding service economy jobs, getting help with logistical problems, everything from car trouble to issues with grades, and dating is much easier for girls. There is more help, both financial and logistical, available at every turn, and quite a few other things. Honestly, the path is so much easier that I think it stifles their personal development and explains a lot of the results gap that some complain about. Not to say that women do not have their own unique challenges and difficulties. They certainly do. Story 19. I would not go into fatherhood with preconceived notions of one sex being more challenging to raise than the other. Children are a challenge to raise. If you are up to the challenge, your little girl or little boy will be fine and fun and frustrating to the end. Story 20. People with one of each always attribute individual differences to gender. You kind of need a few of each gender to have anything like a representative sample. Story 21. I have 4 kids, and while boys and girls might trend one way or the other, the real truth is that every child is unique and will break norms in many ways. My first 2 were girls. The first one has been very calm and collected, and heavily into puzzles, reading, and games. The second is extremely different. She is loud, rabble-rousing, athletic, and very into the pink princess scene. My son was emotionally between those two, so you just never know. Story 22. As far as relating and communicating, my son was much easier because he understood I was open to hear anything he had to say, and did he say quite a lot. If you want to push over dad, then my daughter was that until she was about 14 or 15, when she started getting real secretive and sneaky, especially around boys. At the same time, she somehow believed I was never a boy and didn't know what boys were thinking. Story 23. There's not really a general consensus either way in my experience. It really just depends on the child. If you have a rebellious child, it's not going to matter whether they're a boy or a girl. That being said, I think earlier in life girls are a little easier to raise, if you want to call it that, just because I believe there's a collective tendency to want to protect girls more than boys. Especially when they're older, I think that can come across as rather smothering and kind of push them to act out more during their teenage years, which does inherently make things harder for you as a parent. I suppose the same could be said for boys, but boys tend to be pushed to be more independent. With that independence, I feel like they don't tend to act out as much later on. But again, it's not really a hard and fast rule. It really just depends on the individual 99% of the time. That's my 2 cents anyway. Story 24. The kid is the kid. Gender doesn't impact difficulty. However, as my grandmother said, the smart ones are so much harder to raise than the dumb ones. Story 25. Well, they are 17 and 16 now, but so far it's been about the same. My daughter is a bit more finicky when it comes to food and clothes, but that's about it. Story 26. Have a boy and a girl, teenagers. Both are great kids. 0 problems despite completely different personalities. No teenage rebellion acknowledged. But I'm more afraid for my daughter simply because she may be hurt physically far easier than my son. We do live in a very safe area, but still. Simply going to a night party with friends will be harder for me to accept if it's about my daughter, rather than my son. Also, but this is more linked with personality than gender. My son is very individual. He doesn't care what others say or think about him. He goes his own way. My daughter, on the other hand, is vulnerable to her friends' opinions. Story 27. Both are the same. I love watching my kids. I got lucky and we had a boy first, then a girl, and they're 2 years apart. There's nothing more satisfying, and that makes me feel more alive than seeing those two interact and play. She goes along with everything he does. If he wants to be a ninja, she's a ninja with him. There's not much difference when they're little. It's when they hit their teen years I feel I'll have to start worrying. But you know what? It makes no difference. You do the best you can and hope for the best. They both give so much joy in different ways, but I don't think it's easy. You just enjoy the great memories and try to change things for the better so they see our best versions. Story 28. They are all unique individuals regardless of sex. Your qualities and parental competence have a lot to do with how you perceive raising them. You could have a few of the same sex and still have wildly different experiences raising them. The premise that sex is somehow the dominant factor affecting the amount of parental effort is baseless. Story 29. I think it's not just a sex thing, it's also a compatibility thing. Personalities of the kids and the parents, along with culture around gender roles and preconceived notions, can color the way you see things. I think it's easier to have an easy kid. My nephew, Tom, was like a television baby. Agreeable, sweet, and playful with everyone. You could just put him in his crib and he would fall asleep. Today he's just a sweet, charming, easy kid. My nephew, Sam, is smart and so interesting, but he's always been difficult. He has always been driven to annoy and bother his siblings for his entertainment. He tends to lie, often for no reason, even when he's not in trouble. He is argumentative to a fault and has more fits. When he was a baby, he was a terrible sleeper and had to be rocked to sleep, and that didn't always work. He now doesn't fit in at school and struggles socially. But these kids came from the same parents, same environment, less than 2 years apart. If anything, Tom had more chaos growing up because he had 2 older siblings already. They have an older sister who falls somewhere in the middle between these two. I think you could get lots of answers either way to this question because of personal experience, though I think it skews to the fact that more people think girls are harder to raise. I think that's more due to the fact that our culture still has a bit of a bias towards thinking men are better or easier than women, but that's just me. Some kids come out difficult. Some come out easygoing. Some are in the middle. The sex of the child is irrelevant to this. My public service announcement would be, if you're not prepared to deal with a difficult kid, don't have a kid. It's one of many reasons I don't have kids.